Hey everyone, this is David Pike, the MotorCity mechanic. Now in today's video, we're going to finally get around to working on the wife's 2014 Dodge Durango. It's an RT, which means it's equipped with a 5.7 liter HEMI engine. Now the problem we've been having is the check engine light comes on and off every so often. Now in the past when I pulled the code, it wasn't something that needed to be addressed right away, but today we're going to finally jump on it. So first thing, we're going to pull the code, see what the code is that's caused that light to come on and off. Second thing is we're going to talk about whether or not it's something you need to actually dive in as far as diagnosing or jump straight to replacing the part. And we'll go into more details about that shortly. But for right now, let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing we need to do is we need to plug our scanner in so we can actually see what code we have. Now I've checked it in the past, but it may have changed. I've just been a little lazy as far as getting to the vehicle. Nonetheless, that's going to be the first step. So now that we're hooked up to the vehicle, we need to go through, select the vehicle we're working on, do an auto ID where it retrieves the VIN, and it's going to make me verify that it is a 2014 Durango RT. Now what we're going to do is we're going to pull up the codes. Mainly what we're dealing with is we're going to stick with engine and trans just to see if there's anything there. Now previously I had an oil pressure sensor code, so we're going to see if it's still the same code or do I have a new one, and being that I haven't been fixing all the other issues, now they're compounding on top of each other. So as we're going through, the engine shows they have two codes. Transmission, let's see what we got. We have no DTCs in the trans, so let's see what those two engine codes are. Alright, so we've got a 1521 incorrect engine oil type, and we get a 1520 engine oil sensor circuit. Now, they're both related to oil pressure, and more than likely the 520 code is what's setting the 1521. So for now, I would be addressing the P0520. Now, if this is the first time I've worked on one of these vehicles, I would obviously go through the diag information and run the test on that code. But here's the deal. I've replaced dozens of these things, and it's always been the sensor. So yes, you need to run through the diag, but again, if you've seen this over and over and over, and you already know, you can kind of skip that. And if you don't believe me, well, check this out. Chrysler came out with a bulletin. For that particular year and that particular code, they're having issues with the oil pressure sensor. Step 1, replace oil pressure sensor. So there you have it. There's a bulletin, and just based off of what I've seen in the past, replacing it is going to be the fix. So again, there's a time and place to diag things, especially if you're not familiar with these vehicles. Being a Chrysler tech, I see them over and over and over. I start seeing common failures, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go. But again, oil pressure sensor, I say right off the bat, go ahead and replace. Now, in order to get access to that oil pressure sensor on this Durango with the 5.7 liter, we need to get to the bottom side of the engine because that's where it's located. Now, another available engine that came out was the 3.6 liter. Now, I've showed videos on how you replace that, and that's where you remove both the upper and lower intakes and you get it through the engine compartment. Now, luckily with the 5.7, it's a lot easier, but the thing is we need access to the bottom side, and there's not enough room to crawl up under that front bumper. So you're either going to be using a floor jack with some jack stands or some drive-on ramps, or if you've got a lift, make sure you use that. Just whatever you do, take your time, be careful so you don't get hurt. So now that we've got the vehicle up in the air, we can go ahead and get a clear look of where that oil pressure sensor is located. And there's really two ways you can get to it. Now if you look right here, this is that plastic cutout where you get access to the oil filter. I'll show you in a second where you can look up in there, you can see the sensor. Now if you go a little further back, just past this part of the cross member, you get a little better view of it, and you got a little more access where you can get to it with an extension and you really don't have to struggle too much, which is more than likely the method we're going to use. But for now, let me just show you where it is. Now looking up inside where that cutout is, you can see right here that we've got the oil drain plug, and up here's your oil filter, and just behind of the oil filter is the oil pressure sensor. That's the location right there. So that's the view from the front. Let me show you the view from the back. So now from the back side, just so you know where we're at, you can see we got the oil pan right here, rack and pinion, this location. Now if we look up in here, that's where we're going to locate the oil pressure sensor. It's actually angled back towards this direction. It's going to be easy to get to the connector, and it's going to be easy to get to the sensor. Let me get you a little close-up look of it. If you look right next to this right side engine mount, little connector right there, little brass bottom piece, that's the oil pressure sensor. Now it's got a single stage lock, so it's fairly easy to remove. You got to squeeze in on the connector, pull it off. So there is no secondary lock that you've got to slide over. Again, looking up close, you're just going to squeeze right here and you slide it off. So now what we need to do is we need to get a socket, and an oil pressure sensor takes a special socket. Let me show you one. Now when it comes to the oil pressure sensor, they have a weird shape to them. Look right here. This is not what you're typically used to seeing as far as anything that's got flat sides. So they do make special sockets. Now there's some deeper ones, there's some shallow ones. They all work, they all have their benefits. This one doesn't go quite as deep, but it still holds onto the socket. But then again, in tight spaces, this works great. Again, the deeper one, perfect, sits all the way down in there nice and flush. Now, there is an alternative. You don't necessarily have to have this socket. A lot of technicians do. But if you have a 1 1/16 deep socket, that'll work just as well. So you do have options there. You don't necessarily have to go out and buy these sockets. They're great to have. They fit in tighter spaces than these do, but you get a deeper socket, you can make it work. So the socket we're going to go for is that longer oil pressure sensor socket. We've got a 3/8 swivel universal and a long extension and a ratchet. So that's going to allow us to reach up in there. So at this point we're ready to start guiding that socket and extension up in there. And once we've got that socket fully seated, we're ready to start backing it off. Now when you're removing that sensor, you may or may not have some oil come out with it, so be prepared for that. There we go. And that right there is your oil pressure sensor. This is the old one, and this is the new one. If you look on the tip of the new one, you can see that we've got some kind of sealant on the threads, so that way we don't have any kind of leaks. If the sensor you get has no sealant on there, get you some either liquid Teflon or some Teflon tape, apply it, and then install it, so that way you don't have any of those leaks I just mentioned. Now we're ready to go back with it. Now when going back, I'm just going to start it by hand, then I'll get this socket extension, and then we're going to bring out a torque wrench because there is a spec for this. Now the torque for this is going to be 11 foot-pounds or 132 inch-pounds. Depends on the type of torque wrench you've got. Again, 11 foot-pounds or 132 inch-pounds. Now remember, the longer the extension, the less accurate it is, so the closer you can get to it, the better. Again, we're just kind of snugging it down. It's not 100% critical, but for those of you that do want to spec, there you have it. So now that we've got the sensor started by hand, we can go ahead and grab our socket, swivel, extension, go ahead and get it on, and now we're ready to grab our torque wrench. That's it. Now we can go ahead and put the connector back on. Now when you go to install that connector, listen very closely and you'll hear an audible click. It lets you know it's fully seated. Give it a good little tug. Now the last thing we're going to do is clean up all this residual oil from when we removed the old sensor. At that point we can lower it and clear the code. Now one of the benefits of working at a dealership versus an independent shop is that we see a lot more pattern failures. Remember, we're working on certain makes, certain models, while they're working on everything out there on the road. Another thing is we got more resources at hand, such as Chrysler. Chrysler monitors all the warranty repairs they have on vehicles. When they start seeing a common failure, they try to find out what's going on and make a solution. That's why you saw that service bulletin, and it said straight to replacing the sensor. Don't worry about diagnosing it. Replace it. They already know what's going on. They've seen the numbers and they know that there's a problem. Now when you go to independent shop, the first few times they're going to diagnose it just like they should, and they're going to find out that it's the sensor, and eventually they too are going to see it's a common failure. Now that brings me to a moral and ethical dilemma here. As mechanics and as a customer, should the mechanic charge you $80 to $130 to diagnose this, when all he's going to do is hopefully pull the code and go, bam, you need an oil pressure sensor? Was that worth 5 minutes of his time? I would say no, because basically you could have gone to the local parts store and had that code retrieved for free, and they would have basically told you to do the same thing, mainly because that's what they do. They find something or code and say replace. 95% of the time we do need to diagnose these cars, but when a specific code comes up that is so common as this, I believe there's a time when you need to just jump to straight replacing. You can diagnose it. As a technician, like I said, that's part of our job. But remember, there's times when you see the same writing on the wall every time. Just interpret it case by case. Here, I wouldn't charge the customer. I would only charge for replacing the part. That's my opinion. You're going to have different technicians out there with different opinions, or even shop owners that say, hey, we've got bills, we've got electricity, we've got to pay for. It is what it is. Just remember, find you a shop, find you a mechanic that you have faith in, that you can trust, and hopefully they do the right when it comes to something like this. So if you liked the video, please make sure to press that like button. If this is the first time you've seen one of my videos, please make sure to hit the subscribe as well. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you got any comments or suggestions about anything you saw in today's video or anything Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram, you can leave something in the comments below, or you can email me at david@motorcitymechanic.com. Also, if you like to shop on Amazon, if you scroll down into the description below this video, there's a link. Click on that link, make that your home page for Amazon, and anytime you buy anything on Amazon, it'll help support this channel. Once again, everybody, thanks for watching.